The summer heat was still hanging in the air when 17-year-old Maya stepped out of her dad's car in front of Thunder Kick Martial Arts Academy. She grabbed her worn gym bag from the back seat and took a deep breath. This was her fourth move in 6 years thanks to her father's military career, and she was getting tired of starting over. "You sure about this place?" her dad asked, looking at the building through the windshield. The academy looked impressive enough with its large windows showing the training mats inside and trophies lining the front display case. "Yeah. Dad, I need to keep training," Maya said, adjusting the strap on her bag. Inside that bag were her old uniforms, her belt, and years of memories from dojos across the country. Each move meant leaving behind friends, instructors, and the comfort of knowing where she belonged. Her father nodded. He understood better than most how important martial arts had become to his daughter. It started as a way to help her make friends when they moved to their first base, but it had grown into something much more. Maya had found her passion, her confidence, and her strength on the mats. "Pick you up at 8? He asked. "Sounds good." "Love you, Dad." Maya watched the car disappear around the corner before turning toward the academy doors. Through the windows, she could see a class in session. About 20 students were practicing forms, their movements sharp and synchronized. The instructor was calling out commands from the front of the room. She pushed open the heavy glass door and immediately felt the familiar atmosphere of a martial arts school. The smell of cleaning products mixed with sweat, the sound of bare feet on mats, and the focused energy of people pushing themselves to improve. It felt like home even though she'd never been here before. The front desk was empty, so Maya stood there awkwardly for a moment, watching the class through the large window that separated the lobby from the main training area. The students looked good, really good. Their techniques were clean, and they moved with the kind of confidence that came from solid training. "Can I help you?" a voice asked behind her. Maya turned to see a woman in her 30s with short blonde hair wearing a Academy polo shirt. Her name tag read Ashley, Assistant Manager. "Hi, I'm Maya Washington. My family just moved here and I'm looking to join a martial arts school." Ashley smiled and pulled out a clipboard. "Great, what's your experience level?" "Are you a complete beginner?" "Not exactly," Maya said carefully. "I've been training for about 6 years. I was hoping to check out your advanced classes." Ashley's eyebrows went up slightly. 6 years? That's impressive for someone your age. What styles have you studied?" "Mostly karate and kickboxing, but I've also done some Brazilian jiu-jitsu and mixed martial arts training." The woman behind the desk looked surprised. "Wow, that's quite a background. Let me get Sensei Rodriguez to talk with you." Maya nodded and took a seat in one of the chairs near the window. She watched the class continue their forms, noting the way different students moved. Some were clearly more experienced than others, but the overall level was higher than she'd expected for a suburban school. A few minutes later, Ashley returned with a man who looked to be in his late 40s. He was average height but built like someone who'd been training for decades. His black belt was worn and frayed at the edges, the kind that came from years of use rather than being bought yesterday. "I'm Sensei Rodriguez," he said, extending his hand. "Ashley tells me you have some experience." "Yes, sir. I've been training since I was 11. The instructor's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked her up and down. Maya had gotten used to this reaction over the years. People saw a quiet teenage girl and made assumptions about what she could do. "Where did you train before?" he asked. "My last school was Master Kim's Academy in San Antonio. Before that, I was at different places depending on where my dad was stationed." "Military family?" "Yes, sir." Sensei Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Well, we run a pretty serious program here. Our advanced class isn't just about knowing some moves. These students have been training together for years and they compete at the regional level." Maya kept her expression neutral. She'd heard variations of this speech before. "I understand. Would it be possible to observe a class to see if it would be a good fit?" "Sure, but I think you might want to start with our intermediate group first. Get used to how we do things here, learn our system. Every school is different, you know." "Of course," Maya said politely. Inside, she felt the familiar frustration of being underestimated, but she'd learned patience over the years. As they talked, the class on the mats finished their forms and moved into sparring drills. Maya watched a pair of students work through combinations, noting their timing and technique. They were good, but she could see openings in their defense that her previous instructors would have pointed out immediately. "That's Tyler Chen working with the new student there," Sensei Rodriguez said, following her gaze. "He's one of our best intermediate students. Been training here for 3 years." Maya nodded, continuing to observe. Tyler was skilled, but his footwork was a bit heavy, and he telegraphed his kicks slightly. The kind of things that would get exploited quickly in a real match. So when can I start? Maya asked. How about Thursday evening? That's when we have our intermediate class. 6:30 to 8. Bring a white uniform if you have one, or you can buy one from us. I have one. What about equipment? Just basic sparring gear for now. Gloves, shin guards, headgear. We provide everything else until you decide if you want to continue. Maya shook hands with the instructor and Ashley, picked up an information packet, and headed back toward the door. As she walked out, she could feel eyes on her from some of the students who were taking a water break. She was used to being the new person, the outsider, the one who had to prove herself all over again. What they didn't know was that Maya had been proving herself for years. At her last school in San Antonio, she'd been the youngest person ever promoted to second-degree black belt. She'd competed in national tournaments, often as the only girl in her division, and had won more matches than she'd lost. But Maya had learned something important over the years and through all those moves. Sometimes it was better to let people underestimate you. Sometimes it was smarter to watch and learn before showing what you could really do. Her father had taught her about strategy, both in the military and in life. As she waited for her dad to pick her up, Maya thought about her first impression of Thunder Kick Academy. The facility was nice, the students seemed dedicated, and the instructor appeared knowledgeable. But she'd also picked up on something else. Something she'd encountered before in different forms. There was an assumption in Sensei Rodriguez's voice when he suggested she start with the intermediate class. An assumption based on what he saw when he looked at her, not on what she'd actually told him about her experience. Maya sighed and adjusted her bag strap. Here we go again, she thought. Another school. Another chance to start from the bottom and work her way up. Another opportunity to smile politely while people decided what they thought she was capable of. But Maya had learned to be patient. She'd learned to observe. And most importantly, she'd learned that sometimes the best way to prove yourself was to let others make their assumptions first. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. Thursday evening arrived faster than Maya expected. She stood in the academy's changing room, adjusting her crisp white uniform in the mirror. The familiar weight of the fabric felt good against her skin. Like putting on armor before battle, she'd deliberately chosen her newest uniform, the one without any patches or rank indicators. No point in advertising her background just yet. Maya took a deep breath and walked onto the main training floor. The intermediate class was already gathering, about 15 students ranging from teenagers to adults in their 30s. She recognized Tyler from her visit earlier in the week, along with a few other faces she'd seen through the window. Everyone. We have a new student joining us today, Sensei Rodriguez announced as the class lined up. This is Maya. She's got some previous experience, so let's help her get used to how we do things here. A few students nodded politely in her direction. Maya bowed respectfully and found a spot at the back of the line, which was traditionally where new students started, regardless of their actual skill level. The warm-up began with basic stretches and conditioning exercises. Maya moved through the routine easily, her flexibility immediately apparent to anyone paying attention. Years of dedicated training had given her an almost dancer-like grace, but she was careful not to push herself too hard or show off. Nice flexibility, commented the woman next to her, a 30-something accountant named Lisa, who'd been training for 2 years. Have you done yoga or dance? A little bit of everything, Maya replied with a modest smile. As they moved into basic techniques, Maya found herself holding back significantly. The combinations they were practicing were things she'd mastered years ago, but she executed them at about 70% of her actual speed and power. She wanted to get a feel for the school's teaching style and the skill level of her classmates before revealing her true abilities. Maya, let me work with you on that combination, Sensei Rodriguez called out about halfway through the class. He demonstrated the sequence again, a basic punch-kick-punch combination that was fundamental to most martia. Show how much you've improved since starting here. Maya nodded, but her intuition was telling her something very different. She'd seen this setup before at other schools, though never directed at her personally. An instructor would choose a student they wanted to make an example of, pair them against someone more experienced, and use the mismatch to make a point about their training methods. Over the weekend, Maya did some research. She looked up Thunderkick Academy online, read reviews, and even found some video footage from previous demonstration events. What she discovered confirmed her worst fears. In several videos, she watched Sensei Rodriguez stage what he called educational demonstrations, where he would have his advanced students spar against visitors or newer students. The pattern was always the same. The Thunderkick student would dominate, and Rodriguez would use the victory to lecture about the superiority of his training methods. Proper technique always beats flashy moves, he would tell the audience as his student controlled the match. This is why we focus on fundamentals rather than shortcuts. Maya realized she was being set up to be the sacrificial lamb, the quiet girl from another school who would get outclassed in front of an audience. Proving Rodriguez's points about his academy's superiority, what Rodriguez didn't know was that Maya had been holding back so dramatically that even she wasn't sure anymore what would happen if she unleashed her real abilities. She'd been training at maybe 30% of her capacity for weeks, deliberately dulling her reflexes and timing to match the intermediate level. The question was, what should she do about it? Maya spent hours that weekend practicing in her backyard, working through forms and combinations at full speed for the first time since joining Thunderkick. Her body felt rusty from weeks of restraint, but the muscle memory was still there. The explosive power, the precise timing, the flow between techniques that had taken years to develop. She could expose Rodriguez's game. She could show up to the demonstration and give everyone a display they'd never forget. But what would be the consequences? Maya had learned from her military father that sometimes the best strategy was to let your opponent make the first move. Let them commit to a course of action before revealing your true capabilities. Monday evening's class confirmed her suspicions. As students were pairing up for sparring practice, Sensei Rodriguez made another announcement. Maya, next week you'll be demonstrating with Jake Patterson from our advanced class. Jake, come introduce yourself. Jake was a college-aged guy with the lean build of a serious competitor. Maya had watched his advanced class through the window and knew he was skilled, probably the best fighter in the school. He was also exactly the kind of opponent Rodriguez would choose to make his point. Looking forward to working with you, Jake said politely, though Maya caught something in his expression that suggested he'd already been briefed on his role in next week's demonstration. Same here, Maya replied calmly. As the week progressed, Maya noticed subtle changes in how people treated her. There was a mix of sympathy and anticipation, like people watching someone walk toward a cliff. Several students offered her extra training sessions or advice on how to handle more advanced opponents. Just try not to get discouraged, Lisa told her after Wednesday's class. Jake's really good, but Sensei Rodriguez probably just wants to challenge you. Maya appreciated the concern, even if it was based on completely wrong assumptions about her abilities. The night before the demonstration, Maya lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about her options. She could continue the charade, let Jake dominate her, and give Rodriguez his moment of triumph. It would be the safe choice, the path of least resistance, or she could stop hiding. Maya thought about all the times she'd bitten her tongue over the past month. All the condescending corrections, the assumptions about her background, the patronizing advice from students who had no idea what she was capable of. She thought about her father's words about strategy and timing. Sometimes you had to let people underestimate you, but sometimes when they pushed too far, you had to show them who you really were. Friday evening arrived with unusual energy in the academy. Parents and prospective students filled the viewing area, and the regular students seemed excited to show off their skills. Maya arrived early, changed into her cleanest uniform, and spent extra time stretching and warming up. She'd made her decision. As the demonstration began, Sensei Rodriguez took the microphone and began his usual speech about Thunderkick Academy's philosophy and methods. Maya stood with the other students, calm and focused, waiting for her moment. Tonight, we'll demonstrate the difference between solid foundational training and the shortcuts that some schools take, Rodriguez announced to the audience. Maya here joined us recently from another academy, and we'll show you how proper technique development works. Maya stepped forward when called, bowed respectfully to the audience and to Jake, and took her position on the mat. The crowd quieted, sensing they were about to witness something significant. Rodriguez smiled confidently as he explained the rules of the demonstration. Light contact sparring, 2-minute rounds, educational commentary throughout. What he didn't notice was the subtle change in Maya's stance as she settled into position. Her weight shifted slightly, her hands found their natural guard position, and something shifted in her eyes that Jake was the first to recognize. This wasn't going to go the way anyone expected. The moment Jake and Maya touched gloves to begin their demonstration match, something shifted in the academy's atmosphere. The audience of parents and prospective students leaned forward in their seats, expecting to see a typical training exercise where the experienced student would guide the newcomer through some basic techniques. Jake came forward with confidence, throwing a standard jab-cross combination that he'd used successfully in dozens of previous demonstrations. It was controlled, technically sound, and designed to look impressive while giving his opponent a chance to respond appropriately. What happened next defied everyone's expectations. Maya moved like water around Jake's punches, her body flowing with a grace and speed that seemed to come from nowhere. In one fluid motion, she slipped his cross, stepped inside his guard, and executed a perfect hip toss that sent Jake tumbling to the mat before he could even register what had happened. The silence in the room was instant and complete. Jake hit the mat hard, but controlled, his training helping him absorb the impact. But as he looked up at Maya from the ground, his expression had changed completely. The confident smile was gone, replaced by something between surprise and respect. "What just?" Sensei Rodriguez started to say, but his words trailed off as Jake scrambled back to his feet. Maya had already reset to her fighting stance, but now everyone could see what they'd missed before. Her posture was different. Her movement was different. Everything about her presence on the mat had transformed from the hesitant intermediate student they thought they knew into something else entirely. Jake came forward again, more cautiously this time. He threw a kick that Maya deflected easily, followed by a combination that she countered with surgical precision. Each of her movements was economical, efficient, and devastatingly effective. Within 30 seconds, Jake found himself caught in an armbar that appeared so quickly he barely had time to tap out. The crowd stirred uneasily. Parents looked at each other with confusion. This wasn't what they'd been told to expect. "Again," Rodriguez commanded, his voice tight with something that might have been embarrassment or anger. Jake nodded and approached for a third exchange, but now his entire demeanor had changed. Maya could see in his eyes that he'd recognized what he was dealing with. This wasn't a demonstration anymore. This was a real match against someone who clearly outclassed him. This time Jake used more of his actual skill, throwing combinations that would have troubled most intermediate students. Maya responded by unveiling more of her arsenal. She moved with the kind of fluid precision that came from years of high-level training, countering his attacks with techniques that drew gasps from the knowledgeable observers in the audience. A spinning heel kick that Jake barely managed to duck. A takedown that flowed into a submission attempt so smoothly it looked choreographed, striking combinations that came from angles Jake hadn't expected and couldn't defend against. "Stop," Rodriguez called out, stepping onto the mat, but Maya was already backing away, having controlled the entire exchange without landing any hard shots or causing any real damage to Jake. The room buzzed with whispered conversations. Parents who'd brought their children to potentially enroll were asking questions. Regular students were staring at Maya with expressions ranging from amazement to confusion. "I think there's been some kind of mistake," Rodriguez said, trying to regain control of the situation. "Maya, what exactly is your training background?" Maya stood calmly in the center of the mat, no longer hiding behind the modest demeanor she'd maintained for weeks. "I started training when I was 11. I hold a second-degree black belt in karate and have additional training in kickboxing and Brazilian jiu-jitsu." The words hung in the air like an accusation. "You told us you had some experience," Rodriguez said, his voice rising slightly. "You asked about my experience level, and I said I wasn't a complete beginner," Maya replied even. "Nellie, I also said I'd been training for 6 years and asked to observe your advanced class. You suggested I start with intermediate." Several people in the audience were now openly staring at Rodriguez, clearly questioning his judgment. "Jake, let's try this again," Rodriguez said, but Jake was shaking his head. "Sensei, with respect, I don't think that's a good idea," Jake said quietly, still catching his breath from their exchanges. She's really good." Rodriguez's face was turning red. His carefully planned demonstration was falling apart in front of an audience he'd specifically invited to showcase his academy's superiority. Fine. Tommy, get out here, Rodriguez called to another advanced student. Tommy Chen stepped onto the mat, clearly reluctant. He'd watched the previous exchanges and had no illusions about what he was walking into. But he followed his instructor's command. Maya looked at Rodriguez with something approaching pity. He was making this worse for himself with each decision, but she wasn't going to back down now. She'd spent weeks accepting condescension and veiled insults. If he wanted to keep sending students against her, she would keep demonstrating exactly how wrong his assumptions had been. The match with Tommy lasted about 40 seconds. Maya used different techniques this time, showcasing the breadth of her training. A beautiful combination of strikes that backed Tommy up, followed by a sweep that dropped him to the mat, and a submission hold that had him tapping immediately. The audience was no longer quiet. People were talking openly now, some pointing at Maya, others looking questioningly at Rodriguez. "Where did you train before coming here?" asked an older man from the audience. Maya recognized him as the father of one of the intermediate students. "My last school was Master Kim's Academy in San Antonio," Maya replied. "Before that, I trained at various schools as my family moved around the country." "Master Kim?" The voice came from the back of the room, and everyone turned to see who had spoken. An elderly Asian man in a traditional martial arts uniform had entered the academy. He walked forward with the slow, confident gait of someone who'd spent decades training. "Did you say Master Kim's Academy?" the man repeated. "Yes, sir," Maya said, bowing respectfully. "I am Master Chen," the man announced to the room. "I own Golden Dragon Academy across town. Master Kim is an old friend of mine. We trained together in Korea many years ago." Rodriguez looked like he wanted to disappear. "What belt level did you achieve under Master Kim?" Master Chen asked. "Second degree black belt, sir. I was preparing for my third degree test when my family moved here." Master Chen nodded slowly, his eyes moving from Maya to Rodriguez and back again. "Master Kim doesn't promote students quickly." "A second degree black belt from his school?" He paused meaningfully. "That represents years of serious training." The implication was clear to everyone in the room. Maya wasn't just some intermediate student who'd gotten lucky. She was a legitimate high-level martial artist who'd been dramatically underestimated. "Why didn't you tell us about your actual rank?" Rodriguez demanded, grasping at straws to salvage the situation. Maya's response was quiet but carried clearly through the room. "Because you never asked. You saw what you expected to see and decided where I belonged before you knew anything about my background." The truth of that statement settled over the audience like a weight. Parents began looking at Rodriguez with new eyes, clearly questioning whether this was the kind of judgment they wanted influencing their children's training. "I think we've seen enough for tonight," Master Chen announced diplomatically. "Maya, would you be interested in visiting my school sometime? I think you might find our advanced classes more appropriate for your skill level." Maya bowed again. "I would be honored, Master Chen." As the crowd began to disperse, Maya could hear fragments of conversation that confirmed what she'd suspected. People were questioning Rodriguez's teaching methods, his judgment, and his character. Several parents were asking about other schools in the area, the demonstration that was supposed to prove Thunderkick Academy's superiority had instead exposed the narrow-mindedness and prejudice of its head instructor. Maya changed out of her uniform for the last time in that academy, knowing she would never return as a student. As she packed her bag, several people approached to introduce themselves and ask about her background. Jake was among them. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "We all do. We had no idea." "You treated me well," Maya replied. "Better than some. Still, we should have seen. I mean, the way you moved, even in regular classes." Maya shrugged. "People see what they expect to see." As her father picked her up that evening, Maya felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She'd finally shown her true abilities, but it had come at the cost of burning bridges and creating conflict. "How did it go?" her dad asked as she got in the car. Maya smiled for the first time in weeks. "I think they know who I am now." The phone call came the next morning. It was Master Chen, inviting her to visit his school and offering her a spot in his advanced class without any need to prove herself first. Sometimes, Maya reflected, the best way to earn respect was to stop hiding who you really were. The morning after the demonstration, Maya woke up to find 3 missed calls on her phone. The first was from Master Chen, confirming his invitation to visit Golden Dragon Academy. The second was from Jake, checking to make sure she was okay and apologizing again for how she'd been treated. The third was from a reporter from the local newspaper, who had somehow gotten word about what happened at Thunderkick Academy. Maya decided to return Master Chen's call first. "I've been thinking about our conversation last night," the elderly instructor said when she reached him. "I called Master Kim this morning to ask about you." Maya felt a flutter of nervousness. It had been months since she'd spoken to her former instructor. "He told me some very interesting things," Master Chen continued. "He said you were one of the most naturally gifted students he'd ever taught. He also said you were preparing for your 3rd-degree black belt test and would have passed easily if your family hadn't moved." Master Kim was always very encouraging, Maya said modestly. "He also told me about your tournament record. Regional champion twice, national tournament finalist once. Very impressive for someone so young." Maya had never mentioned her competitive success to anyone at Thunderkick Academy. It hadn't seemed relevant when she was being treated like a beginner. "Would you like to visit my school this afternoon?" Master Chen asked. "I think you'll find the environment more suitable." That afternoon, Maya walked into Golden Dragon Academy with her father beside her. The atmosphere was immediately different from Thunderkick. Students of various ages and skill levels were training together, with advanced students helping beginners and everyone treating each other with obvious respect. Master Chen introduced Maya to his senior students and assistant instructors. When he mentioned her background and achievements, their responses were congratulations and genuine interest in her training, not skepticism or condescension. "We'd love to have you join our advanced class," said Jennifer, one of the assistant instructors. "We train Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday evenings. Hard training, but fun too." "What about starting from scratch to learn your system?" Maya asked, half joking. Master Chen smiled. "Different schools have different strengths. We learn from each other here. If you know techniques we don't teach, maybe you can show us something new." The contrast with her experience at Thunderkick couldn't have been more stark. Over the next few days, word spread quickly through the local martial arts community about what had happened at the demonstration. Maya found herself getting calls and messages from students, instructors, and even parents from Thunderkick Academy. Tyler called to apologize for assuming she needed his help and to ask if she might be willing to train with him sometime. Several other intermediate students from Thunderkick reached out with similar requests. More significantly, Maya learned that several families had withdrawn their children from Thunderkick Academy after witnessing the demonstration. Parents were uncomfortable with Sensei Rodriguez's behavior and questioned whether they wanted their kids learning from someone who showed such poor judgment and prejudice. "I heard Rodriguez is claiming you lied about your experience," Lisa told Maya when they ran into each other at the grocery store. "But everyone who was there knows that's not true. We all heard what you said that first day." Maya shrugged. She wasn't interested in continuing any drama with her former school. "People believe what they want to believe." "Well, for what it's worth, watching you that night was incredible. I've never seen anything like it. You made it look so easy." "It's just training," Maya said. "Lots and lots of training." The real test came when Maya attended her first class at Golden Dragon Academy. She'd been nervous about starting over again, even in a more welcoming environment. But from the moment she stepped onto the mat, she felt at home. The training was challenging in all the right ways. Her classmates were skilled and pushed her to perform at her best. The instructors treated her as an equal and were genuinely interested in learning from her experience at other schools. "Your footwork is beautiful," commented David, one of the senior students after they'd finished sparring. "Very fluid. Is that something you learned in San Antonio?" "Partly there, partly from other places," Maya replied. "Each school taught me something different." For the first time in months, Maya was able to train at her actual ability level, without holding back or pretending to be less skilled than she was. The relief was enormous. 3 weeks into her training at Golden Dragon, Master Chen asked Maya to assist with one of the intermediate classes. "Many of our students are around your age," he explained. "I think they'd benefit from working with someone closer to their own generation, who's achieved what you have." Maya found that she enjoyed teaching almost as much as training. Working with the intermediate students reminded her of her own journey, and the instructors who had helped her along the way. She made sure to encourage each student's individual strengths rather than trying to force them into a single mold. "You're a natural teacher," Jennifer observed after watching Maya work with a struggling student on his forms. "Have you thought about instructor training?" The idea appealed to Maya more than she expected. She'd always focused on her own development, but helping others discover their potential felt equally rewarding. Meanwhile, Thunder Kick Academy was dealing with the fallout from the demonstration. According to the local martial arts grapevine, several of Rodriguez's senior students had left to train elsewhere. The academy's reputation in the community had taken a significant hit. Maya occasionally ran into former classmates around town. Most were friendly and seemed genuinely happy that she'd found a better training environment. A few mentioned that they were considering switching schools themselves. Jake surprised her by showing up at Golden Dragon Academy one Thursday evening. "I hope it's okay that I'm here," he said, looking nervous. "I wanted to talk to Master Chen about training here." "Of course it's okay," Maya replied. "Why wouldn't it be? After what happened at the demonstration, I was part of that whole mess." Maya shook her head. "You were following your instructor's directions. That's not your fault." Master Chen welcomed Jake warmly and invited him to train with the advanced class. Watching Jake work out with different training partners, Maya could see that he was a skilled martial artist who'd been limited by the narrow approach at Thunder Kick. "He's good," Maya commented to Master Chen as they watched Jake spar with David. "Very good," Master Chen agreed. "Sometimes good students just need the right environment to flourish." As the months passed, Maya settled into a routine at Golden Dragon Academy that challenged and fulfilled her in ways she hadn't experienced since leaving San Antonio. She trained hard with the advanced class, assisted with teaching intermediate students, and even began competing again. Her first tournament as a Golden Dragon Academy student was a regional championship where she faced opponents from schools across 3 states. Maya won her division convincingly, but more importantly, she felt like she was representing a school and instructor she truly respected. Master Chen beamed with pride as Maya accepted her trophy. "Master Kim was right about you," he told her afterward. "You have something special." The victory felt different from her previous tournament wins. This wasn't just about personal achievement. It was about proving that talent could flourish when given the right environment and support. Looking back, Maya realized that her experience at Thunder Kick Academy, as frustrating as it had been, had taught her valuable lessons. She'd learned about patience, about the importance of observing before acting, and about the danger of making assumptions about people. But more importantly, she'd learned that sometimes you have to stop hiding your light under a bushel. Sometimes you have to show people who you really are, even if it makes them uncomfortable. 6 months after the demonstration that changed everything, Maya was promoted to 3rd-degree black belt in a ceremony attended by students and instructors from multiple schools in the area. Master Kim even flew in from San Antonio to participate in the testing. "I'm proud of how you've grown, not just as a martial artist but as a person," Master Kim told her after the ceremony. "You've learned to use your abilities wisely." As Maya looked around the room at the diverse group of people who had come to celebrate her achievement, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Thunder Kick Academy was still operating, though with fewer students and a somewhat damaged reputation. Rodriguez had never apologized, but Maya had moved beyond caring about that. She'd found her place in a community that valued skill, respect, and continuous learning. She was training at her full potential, teaching others, and looking forward to whatever challenges lay ahead. The quiet girl who had walked into Thunder Kick Academy months earlier, hoping to simply blend in and train peacefully, had discovered something important about herself. Sometimes the best way to earn respect wasn't to hide your abilities, but to use them wisely and help others discover their own potential. Maya smiled as she looked at her new black belt, thinking about all the young students she would teach and inspire in the years to come. Her journey was just beginning. Art systems. Maya nodded and repeated the moves, deliberately making small mistakes that a student with some experience might make. She slightly mistimed the kick and didn't fully rotate her hip on the final punch. "See how she's not fully committing to the techniques?" Sensei Rodriguez said to the class using Maya as an example. "This is what happens when you learn bad habits at other schools. We'll need to break these down and rebuild them properly." Several students murmured understanding, and Maya felt a familiar burn of frustration in her chest. But she kept her expression neutral and simply nodded as if accepting the correction. "Partner up for sparring drills," the instructor announced. "Maya, you work with Tyler. He'll help you understand our sparring system." Tyler was a nice enough kid, probably 16 or 17 like herself, with the confident bearing of someone who'd been told he was talented. As they put on their protective gear, he gave Maya what he probably thought was encouraging advice. "Don't worry if you feel overwhelmed," he said, adjusting his headgear. "Sensei Rodriguez runs a tough program, but you'll get the hang of it. Just try to keep up and don't be afraid to ask questions." Maya simply smiled and nodded. "Thanks, I appreciate it." When they began light sparring, Maya had to concentrate hard on fighting at Tyler's level rather than her own. She let several of his attacks through that she could have easily countered, and she threw techniques that were obvious enough for him to defend against. Even so, Tyler was working harder than he'd expected. Maya's defense was better than he'd anticipated, and her timing was surprisingly good for someone who supposedly needed to learn their system. "You're picking this up pretty quickly," Tyler panted during a water break. "Have you done much sparring before?" "A little," Maya said, toweling off sweat she wasn't actually producing. "My old school did some light contact work." After sparring, they moved on to forms practice. This was where Maya had to be most careful. Forms were like martial arts poetry, and she knew dozens of them by heart, but she chose to follow along with the basic form the class was learning, occasionally forgetting parts of the sequence or executing techniques with less precision than she was capable of. "Maya, watch your stance in the third section," Sensei Rodriguez corrected, stepping behind her to adjust her position. "You're leaning too far forward. This is fundamental stuff that should have been drilled into you at white belt level." "Sorry, Sensei," Maya replied quietly. "I'll work on it." She noticed a few students exchanging glances. She could practically read their thoughts. Another student from a McDojo, someone who'd been promoted too quickly without learning proper fundamentals. The class ended with a brief meditation period, something Maya particularly appreciated. As they sat in silence, she reflected on the evening. The instruction was solid, if traditional. The students were dedicated and respectful. But there was definitely an attitude in the school, a sense that their way was the only right way, and anyone who came from somewhere else needed to be broken down and rebuilt. After class, several students approached her as they were changing. "How did you like it?" asked Lisa, the accountant. "It was great," Maya replied honestly. "Everyone's been very welcoming." "You'll get used to Sensei Rodriguez's teaching style," said another student, a college guy named Brett. "He's tough, but he knows what he's doing. Just don't take it personally when he corrects you. He does it to everyone." Maya nodded appreciatively, though she noticed Brett's assumption that she needed reassurance about being corrected. Tyler approached as she was packing her bag. "Hey, you did pretty well for your first class. Want some advice?" "Sure," Maya said. "Practice that form we learned tonight at home, but don't try to add your own flair to it yet. Sensei Rodriguez can spot students who try to mix in techniques from other schools, and he's not a fan. He likes to build students up from scratch his way." "Good to know," Maya said. "Thanks for the heads up." As Maya waited for her father to pick her up, she found herself with mixed feelings about the experience. On one hand, it was a relief to be training again, even at a reduced level. The physical activity felt good, and it was nice to be around other martial artists. On the other hand, the patronizing attitude was already wearing thin. She'd been respectful, humble, and eager to learn, but she could sense the assumptions being made about her abilities and background. "How was it?" her dad asked as she got into the car. "Interesting," Maya replied, buckling her seatbelt. "The instruction is good and the students seem nice enough." But her father knew her well enough to hear the hesitation in her voice. "I don't know. It's just, I feel like I'm starting from zero again, you know? Even more than usual." "Well, every school has its own culture," her dad said diplomatically. "Give it a few weeks and see how it goes." Maya nodded, looking out the window at the academy as they drove away. She could see the advanced class setting up for their session, students who moved with the kind of confidence and skill that came from years of training together. That's where she belonged, Maya knew. Not with the intermediate students who were still learning to properly execute basic combinations, but she also understood that earning her place in that advanced class would take time, patience, and probably more than a few demonstrations of her actual abilities. For now, she would continue to fly under the radar. She would let Tyler feel like he was helping her improve. She would accept Sensei Rodriguez's corrections with appropriate humility. She would practice forms at home that were far below her skill level and pretend to be learning things she'd mastered years ago. But Maya also knew that this situation couldn't last forever. Eventually, either through necessity or opportunity, her true abilities would surface. And when that day came, she had a feeling it was going to surprise everyone at Thunder Kick Academy. As they drove through the quiet suburban streets toward home, Maya began planning her strategy for the weeks ahead. Patience, observation, and gradual improvement would be her tools. She'd done this dance before at other schools, though rarely to this extent. The question wasn't whether she'd eventually prove herself. The question was what would happen when she did. 3 weeks had passed since Maya started training at Thunder Kick Academy, and the routine had become frustratingly familiar. She would arrive early, bow respectfully, and take her place at the back of the intermediate class. She would execute techniques at half her actual speed, accept corrections for mistakes she wasn't actually making, and smile politely when other students offered her basic advice. The hardest part wasn't the physical restraint, it was the mental game. Maya had to constantly remind herself to hold back, to look confused at the right moments, to ask questions about techniques she could perform in her sleep. It was like being a professional pianist forced to pretend she was learning scales. Maya's improving, but slowly. She overheard Sensei Rodriguez telling Ashley one evening after class, "Some students come from schools that just hand out belts. Takes time to undo bad training." Maya pretended not to hear as she packed her equipment bag. The irony was painful. At her previous school, she'd been helping to teach classes and preparing for her third-degree black belt test. Here she was being treated like someone who barely understood basic stances. But she'd also been observing. Maya had watched every class, studied every instructor, and analyzed the dynamics of the school. She understood now that Thunder Kick Academy prided itself on being elite. They looked down on other schools, dismissed other training methods, and seemed to believe their approach was superior to anything taught. Elsewhere, Sensei Rodriguez in particular had strong opinions about martial arts, schools that promoted students too quickly or taught flashy techniques without proper foundation. Maya had heard him make these speeches multiple times, usually with pointed looks in her direction. "We build real fighters here," was his favorite phrase, not tournament point scorers or belt collectors. Maya found this particularly amusing, since she'd competed successfully at tournaments that several of his advanced students had entered and lost. But she kept that information to herself. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening when Sensei Rodriguez made an announcement that made Maya's stomach drop. "Next week, we're hosting our quarterly demonstration class," he told the assembled intermediate students. "Parents, prospective students, and members of the community are invited to see what Thunder Kick Academy is all about." Maya had been through demonstration classes before. They were usually positive events where students showed off their skills and schools recruited new members. But the look in Sensei Rodriguez's eyes suggested this might be different. "I'll be selecting a few students to participate in special demonstrations," he continued, his gaze settling on Maya. "This will be a chance to show the difference between proper martial arts training and other approaches." After class, Maya lingered in the changing room, trying to process what she'd just heard. When she emerged, she found Tyler waiting for her. "Hey, congratulations," he said with what seemed like genuine friendliness. "Sensei Rodriguez picked you for the demonstration. That's a big deal for someone who's only been here a few weeks." "Did he say what kind of demonstration?" Maya asked, though she was beginning to suspect. "Usually it's sparring or forms, stuff like that. Don't worry, he probably just wants to